Great. All right, let's go ahead and begin as we usually do with the prayers. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. Then a short mandala offering. This ground, anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. And refuge in bodhicitta as usual. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Sangha chodang soke choknam pa jangchu bardu dakni kyapsu chi daki chunyan gipe sonam gi Jola Penshir Sangye Drupar Sho Sangye Chodang Soki Choknam La Jangchu Bardu Dakni Kyapsu Chi Daki Chunyan Gipe Sonam Gi Jola Penshir Sangye Drupar Sho. All right, let's do a short meditation. Give ourselves a chance to come into this space with a bit more focused mind by meditating on the breath for the first few minutes, and then I'll lead you in setting motivation just after that. So can begin the meditation now. Now let's set our motivation for tonight. And let's do this by reflecting on these 5 faults that we saw in the last class that we'll be continuing to explore in tonight's class. Just to see again to what degree has our own learning throughout this course, through these 24 sessions, tonight being the 24th, what have we learned about Buddha nature, and how has it helped us to overcome these faults? Of course, the first one is perhaps one of the major reasons why the Uttara Tantra is taught, is to help overcome this lack of self-confidence we might have, somehow thinking that we can't become Buddhas, that we're somehow blocked from achieving that. Through our own study of Buddha nature, coming to understand more deeply what it is, perhaps we've kind of overcome a bit of that, have a bit more confidence in our ability to achieve that result of Buddhahood through possessing Buddha nature. The second fault is, even if we do have some confidence in our Buddha nature, perhaps we've developed some sense of pride in somehow thinking that while we have Buddha nature, perhaps other beings don't. And so we feel a sense of superiority. Or maybe again, it's simply just looking at things and not being clear that all beings possess this Buddha nature. And this, of course, also informs our path, because we need to recognize that potential for all beings to achieve complete enlightenment, and to let go of any specialness we might feel about ourselves as we dedicate ourselves to the welfare of those beings on our path. So again, hopefully our study of Buddha nature has helped overcome any of that fault, not seeing that other beings possess the Buddha potential as well. Then the third and the fourth faults, which are also again overcome by the teachings on emptiness, the superimposition, thinking that things exist inherently, or the deprecation, thinking that if things don't exist inherently, then they cannot exist at all. Hopefully, while we've been investigating this topic, we've come to see more clearly what emptiness is through recognizing the empty nature of the mind. That the mind lacks inherent existence. All the stains, the adventitious defilements lack inherent existence. But yet all of these phenomena still exist. They're conventional truths, conventional reality that cannot be denied, while the superimposition of a real conventional reality, an inherently existent conventional reality, must be refuted. So we find again this teaching of the middle way within Buddha nature, understanding exactly what we need to realize to avoid these two extremes of superimposition and deprecation. So again, reflect on your own experience over these last 6 months studying this topic. Has it helped you to gain greater appreciation for that middle way view, a deeper avoidance of these two extreme views? And then finally, the teachings on Buddha nature are actually said to help us to overcome our self-cherishing. By seeing that all sentient beings have Buddha potential just like ourselves, we recognize that therefore we must abandon this preoccupation with our own welfare, our tendency to be solely focused on ourselves, and adopt the mind that cherishes others. It is the root of bodhicitta and the main impetus throughout our path to keep us moving in the direction of Buddhahood, to want to be of the greatest benefit to all beings by abandoning that self-cherishing and adopting the mind that cherishes others. So again, perhaps our teachings on Buddha nature have also influenced us in that way, help us to see the error of our ways, continuing to be plagued by that mind of self-centeredness and the need to replace it with the mind that holds others supreme. So again, all of these can feed into our bodhicitta, reassuring that we can become enlightened, that all beings can attain that state, that there is a perfect view of the middle way that avoids these two extremes, and that we can adopt the mind of cherishing others and abandon self-cherishing as a means to accomplish the goal of Buddhahood. And we do that now by cultivating the motivation of bodhicitta that is primarily directed to benefiting all sentient beings, with the recognition that in order to do that, we must become enlightened ourselves. And hold that motivation of bodhicitta deeply in your heart for tonight, so everything we do becomes a cause for that result, our own enlightenment and the enlightenment of all beings. And when you're ready, and open your eyes fully, and we'll begin. Okay, so I did want to share one thing that actually Stephen alerted me to after the last class. It was that one passage. I'll put it on the screen here from Stephen's email that he sent to me last Thursday. That passage is towards the top. It was from page 217 of our text, to claim that the ultimate truth is not existing and not non-existing is a deprecation of the ultimate truth. And therefore, it is not possible to make the distinction that the Tathagata Essence Sutra is interpretable while other sutras are definitive. And I mentioned last week when I taught on this that even Geshe Jumpo Gyaltsen, whose commentary I've been relying on a fair amount during this teaching this time, I didn't have his commentary the previous time I taught this. And he didn't even have much to say about this phrase of who would think this and what that really means to say the ultimate truth is not existing and not non-existing. And for Stephen, it based on the study of illumination of the intent, or illuminating the intent of Tsongkhapa's text, his commentary on Chandrakirti's text, this came to mind for him. Gorampa Sonam Sangye, who is described here as a great Sakya master. The Sakya tradition is actually the tradition that Lama Tsongkhapa was primarily trained in, though he did have exposure to the Nyingma and the Kagyu as well. Of course, Geluk was the tradition that he founded, and we're celebrating his sort of a anniversary today in the Geluk tradition, an auspicious day to end our studies, I assume. Anyway, he's this master from the Sakya tradition who explained what he considered to be the true meaning of his school's principle of neither existence nor non-existence, again, in referring to ultimate reality, ultimate truth. As it says here, this dictum he interprets not as meaning non-existent in ultimate reality in terms of the ultimate analysis, that we cannot find things to exist inherently, and not non-existent on the surface or the conventional level. Again, these are the finding of the middle way between this, not saying that you can find inherent existence ultimately through your analysis. Rather, you find the lack of that, and yet you don't find utter non-existence. You can still adhere to some form of conventional existence. And that's, again, what Tsongkhapa understands and what Gyaltsab in our text understands. He says, so it's not like that, but rather as synonymous with freedom from all discursive proliferation, in terms of the four extreme positions. The four extreme positions are something is non-existent, existent, non-existent and existent, or neither non-existent nor existent. But I'm not going to get into those so much tonight. What I wanted to do is just talk a little bit about this Gorampa and his views. Not that I'm an expert on this, because obviously it didn't come to mind for me last week. We run across these things often, these different points of view as you're studying these philosophical texts, and sometimes they just kind of get swept away to some degree, and you don't think about them again. There is a little book that I pulled off my shelf, though, called The Two Truths Debate, Tsongkhapa and Gorampa on the Middle Way. And I want to just read one little passage from here because I think it helps elucidate what is being said by Gorampa. It's not very long. He says, given the close link between the limits of language and that of the conceptual mind, Gorampa argues that just as an enlightened person cannot coherently explain ultimate reality because they know it in a very different way than the students who are hearing the teaching, an ordinary being cannot realize ultimate reality. It is not possible to explain ultimate truth through definition, through defined object, or through any other means in the manner it is experienced during the meditative equipoise, which is free from any conceptual elaborations. This is because ultimate truth is inexpressible through language and is not an apprehended object of the mind. So it's kind of like this idea that if you really want to talk about what ultimate truth is, it's an experience of an object that you can't really talk about in conventional terms. And so to say it's existent or not existent or not non-existent or whatever the phrase was, that becomes superfluous because we're not talking about anything that can be conceptualized. We're talking about something that can only be experienced. And actually, this whole debate between Tsongkhapa and Gorampa, of course, their dates don't quite intersect. If we put back on the screen what I had in terms of the dates that Stephen had provided in that 1429 to 1489, Tsongkhapa passed away in 1419, so it's 10 years later. So again, he was kind of observing what Tsongkhapa said and coming out with another view in terms of how ultimate truth needs to be posited. It becomes a bit kind of a one-sided view, though, because you can't then talk about conventional reality in quite the same way. I think if you say that you have this ultimate truth that becomes, I don't know, a bit more of a absolute thing that you are putting forward in that manner of being just experiential. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know much more about it. I've never read this book from cover to cover. In fact, I went back when I picked it up off my shelf. I only had my little marker a couple of pages into it because I picked it up and started reading it once and then must have gotten distracted by other things I needed to read. But um, so just know that there are different views on the Prasangika view of ultimate truth, although he certainly would adhere to the same concept of being Gorampa. I don't think would deny that it's empty of inherent existence. He just says when you start talking in that language, you're not talking about really the ultimate truth, and ordinary beings can't know ultimate truth. So Tsongkhapa says that we can know ultimate truth conceptually. Because remember, that's even the demarcation of getting from the path of accumulation to the path of preparation, is having a conceptual realization of emptiness that is the union of calm abiding and special insight, observing it. So again, Tsongkhapa would disagree and say that you can have a conceptual framework to understand emptiness. Yes, the experience of it, the taste of emptiness is going to be different. And they often use that phrase of like the taste of the bark of the sugar cane versus the actual sugar cane that has a much sweeter taste, obviously, than the bark. So again, I just wanted to share that little bit. Thank you, Stephen, for having your suggestion of what that might be, and I'm pretty sure that must be what's being talked about here. Again, Tsongkhapa, although he predated the Gorampa, Gyaltsab was younger and I think was probably coexisting at the time of Gorampa and didn't attribute that directly to him, but no doubt that view was kind of being held to some degree, just made more articulate by Gorampa. I don't know enough about the history of it and didn't have time to do much more research, but let's go back into our text and work a bit with this this idea of, again, the 5 faults that we've been looking at. Let me put on, well, actually, what I want to do is I want to start with, do I want to start with the slides? What I want to do first is get my camera a little clearer. For some reason, again, I've gone a bit fuzzy there. Let me, I think I actually, now let me go back to the text, sorry. The text here is, where do I have that? No, there. Okay, not there. I gotta get it further over. No, where did I put that? Tathagata essence, Tathagata essence. No, that's nothing, something else. Oh no, don't tell me I don't have it up. There it is. Okay, it's at the very end. Okay, so this was what we covered last week. We were in this whole section about the purpose of teaching the basic element, the Buddha nature. And we had verse 157, which is, again, remember that we have these two different arguments that can be embodied in what's in 157 according to Gyaltsab Je's commentary, saying like clouds, dreams, and illusions, which again is from the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, that second wheel turning, all objects of knowledge in every way are said to be empty. Why then do conquerors say here that sentient beings have Buddha essence, which again is put forward as a sort of permanent phenomenon that makes it seem like you're adhering to things having some sort of inherent essence, which is contrary to what the second wheel turning said. That's the contradictory argument or contradiction argument. But then there's also the no purpose argument that says, if you go down towards the bottom of that paragraph, such a teaching has no purpose, because if it is to be taught to ordinary foolish beings, they will hear the teachings but will not be able to understand it. So this is kind of both of these arguments being encapsulated in that verse. Then in verse 158, we saw the five faults, which we just meditated on. So I'm not going to cover them again, because we're also going to be talking about them in terms of some of the later verses. So let's just go forward to where we were last time, which was right after this answer in brief, the detailed explanation that goes into two more verses that give an elucidation in terms of the contradiction argument. So let's look at what is said in these verses, explaining how the former and latter are non-contradictory. The second wheel turning that teaches emptiness of inherent existence, and the third wheel turning, specifically the Tathagata Garbha Sutra, which teaches Buddha nature as a permanent phenomenon. The reality limit, which again is a code word for Buddha nature, is devoid of all composite phenomena, meaning that all those composite phenomena that we're going to talk about, suffering, the sources of suffering, afflictions, karma, and what have you, those things are all there adventitiously. It's devoid in the sense of not having those as part of its nature. Afflictions, karma, and the fruitions, in terms of the sufferings of having an embodied form and so on in samsara, are said to be like a cloud and so on. And this is explaining those individually in the next verse. Afflictions are said to be similar to clouds. Karma is likened to the enjoyments in a dream. The aggregates, which are the fruitions of karma and afflictions, are likened to the magical manifestation in an illusion. So these three, again, are true sufferings and our true origins. Remember, the true sufferings are the fruitions of our karma and afflictions, which are the true causes of our being in samsara. So again, these have three different analogies that are used for them. Afflictions like clouds, karma like enjoyments in a dream, and then the fruitions into various rebirths that are the suffering states of existence are likened to a magical manifestation in an illusion. So let's look at how this is explained by Gyaltsab Je, because this is again saying that all these phenomena still do lack inherent existence. There's no denying of their lack of inherent existence. And that's what we mean by saying that there is a Buddha nature that is free of those composite phenomena, because they are there adventitiously. We don't have to be experiencing the sufferings of samsara. The causes and conditions can be changed and we can remove them. Okay, so let's look at what he says at the bottom, the teaching in the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, that all things are empty by nature and adventitious like, and the teaching here in the third turning, that there exists a nature within the nature of mind, are not contradictory. This is because of the following. The reality limit, or natural purity of the minds of sentient beings, referring to the Tathagata essence as taught here, is completely divorced of composite phenomena, which can be summarized as suffering and its causes. This means that these phenomena are adventitious and do not penetrate to the nature of the mind, which is also the meaning of the teachings from the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. In the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras uphold this, that our mind has an empty nature, meaning that all that is defiling our minds is not inherently of the nature of our minds. It all is built on ignorance that adheres to that inherent existence, and it all can be removed by practicing the antidotes to that. Then he says in the next paragraph, this should be understood in the following way. When teaching that all things are empty by nature To talk of the Tathagata essence being empty of suffering and the cause of suffering is referring to the emptiness of holding to true existence, which apprehends all things as real and which is the chief among the afflictions as taught here. Again, this is the whole thing. Many of you have seen my little slide that I share on the tree of samsara. I don't know if I shared that as part of this course. I don't think I did, but there's like a tree that has roots, and the roots are ignorance. And then, of course, up the trunk of the tree is our various states of mind. We can have virtuous states of mind, non-virtuous states of mind, and then the branches are like the karma we create on the basis of that. And then we have the fruit. And you get kind of rotten fruit from the non-virtuous states of mind and the actions that follow from that and so on. And then you get the more positive fruit, the enjoyable fruit of kind of temporary happiness from those virtuous actions, but they're all rooted in ignorance. So that's all in the nature of dukkha. When it comes down to it, the whole tree of samsara is unsatisfactory. So that's what the mind is free of, because all of that is rooted in ignorance. It's rooted in a false conception. It's there adventitiously and can be removed when we develop the wisdom of emptiness that overcomes that root of ignorance. So that's kind of the whole point of it, is by saying that it's devoid of that, or kind of divorced from that, is the whole point of what is in this Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, as well as what's being communicated in the Tathagata Garbha Sutra in the third wheel turning. It says here, this is adventitious in the sense that it does not engage with the nature of mind. This means that nothing will exist in the mind the way it is apprehended by holding to true existence, right? Because that's fiction. That is not in accord with reality. However, apart from refuting the object apprehended by this holding of true existence, the truly existent I or inherently existent whatever, there is no other method of establishing all things as being empty of true existence. So that's the way you uproot the entire tree, is through realizing the wisdom that is contrary to that ignorance that holds to true or inherent existence. That's the only way out, one way out. If the afflictions are established as adventitious, then, of course, the karma that is built on those afflictions and the ripening of that karma, the suffering states that we experience, the aggregates, are also established as adventitious, right? Because they're all coming from the poison of ignorance. So the entire thing is poisoned, and so if you get rid of the one, you get rid of all of them, the root. The teaching in the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, he says that karma and the afflictions and the ripening produced by them are adventitious, establishes the emptiness of true existence of all things as the meaning of those sutras. And that very emptiness of the true existence of the mind of sentient beings is the meaning of the teaching in the Tathagata Essence Sutra, again in the third wheel turning, on the existence of the element, the basic element, the Buddha nature. So they're saying the same thing, right? Essentially. Therefore, not only are the teachings in the middle and third turnings not contradictory, they are actually identical in meaning. Okay, so again, I don't think I need to say so much on that, because that's what we've been working with, and we even talked about it last week to some degree in some of those argument type of sub-points that were being raised and that Gyaltsab Je was refuting. So then he goes on to say, and this is a little bit of a puzzle, but I'm not going to speak so much about it. If the argument was resolved according to the tenets of those Madhyamikas, meaning the Svatantrika Madhyamikas, not the Prasangika Madhyamikas, who assert holding to true existence to be an obstruction to omniscience, this answer would be a little wrong. Therefore, this root text and its commentary should be explained in the way Acharya Chandrakirti explained the tenets of the master Nagarjuna. Although this would involve the refuting of other extremes with much reasoning, his work truly penetrates, meaning Chandrakirti's work, his supplement to the Middle Way. Again, that is the text that Tsongkhapa is commenting on, that we had referenced earlier tonight. His work truly penetrates the meanings of the text. Therefore, the great treatise on the thinking of the root text and commentary by the glorious, omniscient, and precious master Losang Drakpa, again, that would be illuminating the intent, his commentary on that, should be known as the complete and finest explanation of the thinking of this root text and commentary. So the Svatantrika Madhyamaka, just so you know, what they say, again, all the tenet systems below Prasangika Madhyamaka say that to be liberated from samsara, in other words, to attain arhatship on the Hinayana path for either the hearers or the solitary realizers, to achieve that, all you need to realize is the lack of existence of a self-sufficient, substantially existent self, which is a coarser view of self as like a controller. Again, I've talked about it previously, I think, so I don't need to go into much detail. All of those schools say that liberation can be attained on that alone. Now, in the Mahayana tenet systems, they talk about realizing a selflessness of phenomena as being involved in being able to become a Buddha. And in Svatantrika Madhyamaka, they say that it's true existence, which they are defining differently than what Prasangika says. Again, for Svatantrika Madhyamaka, they say that there's kind of something from the side of the object that cannot be posited as that object without the it appearing to a non-defective consciousness, meaning either our mental consciousness or our sense consciousnesses, that things have kind of a 50-50 arrangement. I think I talked about this previously as well. So the idea is that for them, this true existence, holding to true existence and removing that is only something that is done as a means to attain enlightenment. It is the knowledge obstructions, the obstructions to omniscience, whereas the obstructions to liberation, the afflictive obstructions, are grasping at a self-sufficient, substantially existent self. So again, what they define it very differently. Now, the implications of that in terms of what we're talking about, I'm not as clear about, and that's where I'm just going to leave that go. But what he's making clear here in this paragraph is that in order to get to the correct meaning of emptiness and what true existence you're refuting, you need to follow the correct tenets, which are the tenets as set out by, of course, Nagarjuna originally in Fundamental Wisdom, and then Chandrakirti elucidated them most clearly in terms of his commentary called Supplement to the Middle Way, the Madhyamakavatara, which again, Tsongkhapa explained quite peerlessly as well. So you have all of this that we're being directed by Gyaltsab to rely upon that in order to get to the true meaning of the emptiness that we need to realize in order to become a Buddha, in order to actualize our Buddha potential. Okay. Now we get into the actual analogy where these three are discussed in verse 160. Afflictions are likened to clouds, whereas karma and its ripening are said to be like dreams, illusions, and so forth. So karma is like dreams, the ripening into the aggregates and what have you are like illusions. So this is how he explains it. Afflictions are likened to clouds because they arise in the mind adventitiously, right? Clouds are not permanently in the sky. Maybe if you live in like Seattle or something, they are or seem to be. But from what I hear, I've never lived in Seattle. But the point is that clouds have causes and conditions that eventually cause them to dissipate and to not, obscure the sun. So afflictions similarly arise adventitiously when we have the object of our affliction, the seed of that affliction ready to arise, and a inappropriate attention towards that object, then we have all the causes for the afflictions to be there, like the clouds in the sky. Karma, which is formed and shaped by afflictions, he says, is created by faults and does not exist in the way it is experienced. It is therefore likened to the experiences in dreams. The Buddha often used dreams as an analogy for things, but we know from our own experience of dreams that things seem to be experienced so real in our dream state. And that is similar to the way that the karma that we're creating and so on seems to be experienced in a different way than the way it actually exists, because it too lacks inherent existence. Then the last sentence there, affliction and the ripening of karma formed by those afflictions, the contaminated aggregates, those aggregates appear as real, but do not truly exist. And so they're likened to illusions and emanations, another frequent kind of illusory factor that the Buddha taught about or used as to show the emptiness of inherent existence. It's magician's illusions, where things are conjured up that appear before us but don't really have that reality. So too our aggregates and all the experiences within these various embodied states are similar to that. So, contrary to how it was explained previously, if the teaching on being empty of suffering and the cause of suffering is not seen as scriptural authority for the teaching that all things are empty, and it is asserted that the ultimate truth is empty of all conventional phenomena. Remember, we talked about that earlier, that a pot is empty of being a pot, or a self is empty of being a self. This would clearly, he says, be a very superficial idea, because nowhere is it taught, directly or indirectly, that it is empty of the conventional true path. This is kind of getting at the idea. We did see this earlier. I think it was around page 218, and then even earlier on like page 216, this concept that we were saying just now too, that the mind is empty of the first two truths, true suffering and true origins of suffering, because those things are there adventitiously. But that doesn't mean that true paths and true cessations, the other two truths, have some sort of inherent existence. We're saying that you still have the empty nature of all phenomena. We're not positing that that doesn't apply to everything that exists and that all things lack inherent existence. That is the final meaning of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. And the idea that things would be empty of themselves in kind of a very distorted way, that, you know, cows are empty being cows. Well, no, there is conventional reality that are the cows, and we give them a particular name and designate them as such. They don't exist inherently as cows. That's what's being negated. So again, if you have this kind of screwy view of the object of negation, or the applicability of emptiness to all phenomena, then you're going to, again, be misguided in terms of how you're approaching this. There's no emptiness of the conventional true path. All these things do still exist. That's as near as I can get in terms of the meaning of all of that. That's refuting the contradiction argument. Now, on the next page, we're up to page 222 now. We're going to look at the no purpose argument. Even if you go a little further up, it says the purpose of teaching the existence of the element. And so we are looking at that, even though this is difficult for beings to realize, there is a purpose to teaching that, and that is to, again, overcome the five faults. So Maitreya says in 161, having been expounded beforehand in this way, and again in this Uttara Tantra, beforehand meaning, of course, in the Tathagata Sutra, it is presented that the basic element exists in order to abandon the five faults. So previously, in the middle turning, it was taught that all things were empty by nature. And again, here in the Uttara Tantra, the later Tantra, it is taught that the element of a Buddha exists in all sentient beings in order to remove the five faults and to develop the five qualities. So again, I guess maybe that first phrase, having been expounded beforehand in this way, is more referring to the emptiness of inherent existence that was taught in the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. But again, it could still be applicable to the Tathagata Sutra, because they're teaching the same emptiness. So here we are reiterating that there are five faults that need to be removed and five qualities that need to be developed, or that can be developed due to one's understanding. The five qualities are generally kind of just the opposite of the five faults. We'll see that as we go through things that you're able to embrace that are contrary to what the fault is. So these are divided up in terms of the very first fault is verse 162 is being discussed here. Then we see, and that's called an obstruction to the development of bodhicitta. Then if you look at the top of the page there, it says an obstruction to the bodhisattva practices. That's the second fault that has to do with developing this false pride, thinking that other beings don't possess Buddha nature, but you do. The third fault is where it's an obstruction to an aspect of practice, understanding the true state. And that is actually, or the third heading here is actually applicable to both the third and the fourth faults, superimposition and deprecation. You have to understand the true state through the middle way, discerning it correctly, and then you will avoid both of those faults. Then the fifth fault is taught here as the fourth point, an obstruction to developing love and compassion, the causes of bodhicitta, because your self-cherishing mind will keep you from fully cultivating great love and great compassion for all beings. So let's look at the first one, which is, again, the very first fault, an obstruction to the development of bodhicitta through our own lack of confidence in developing our minds to that degree. Not having heard about this, some due to the fault of self-contempt or some form of self-deprecation, stemming from a discouraged mind, do not generate bodhicitta. Again, some beings are going to have an obstacle to generating bodhicitta because they think they're incapable of becoming a Buddha. So what Gyaltsab Je says here is the need to perceive the lineage of the Buddha existing in all sentient beings is as follows. Not having heard that the naturally pure element with the potential to develop every Dharma of the Buddhas exists within themselves, some think, I can never become enlightened. And with this fault of self-contempt, they become disheartened, do not develop the bodhicitta, and do not develop the bodhicitta. It seems like an and's missing in there. To abandon this and to develop bodhicitta is one purpose of the teaching. So again, the quality that we're talking about, that's the reverse of it, is to have that confidence that you can become a Buddha and the determination to develop bodhicitta and proceed on the path all the way to enlightenment. So again, this is the very first fault. And by making us aware of that, giving us that knowledge that we have this potential within ourselves, that will overcome that fault. The second one, which is an obstruction to the bodhisattva practices, Maitreya says, some, by generating bodhicitta, proclaim, I am a supreme bodhisattva, looking down on others who have not generated bodhicitta, right? Kind of thinking, oh, well, I'm the superior one. Everyone else is inferior and they don't possess Buddha nature, but I do. Again, I suppose some beings would have that thinking. We might even watch how that creeps into our own thinking, particularly as we relate to other people from other spiritual traditions that we might look down on the basis of our awareness or what have you. Gyaltsab Je says, if a disciple who has developed bodhicitta does not see that the lineage of the Buddha exists in all sentient beings, they become conceited, thinking, I am the best because I can become a Buddha, and regard those who have not developed bodhicitta as inferior. Therefore, by abandoning these thoughts and seeing that all sentient beings can become Buddhas, they practice for the sake of others. So they develop that, again, awareness that all beings have Buddha potential and a desire to practice for the sake of all beings so everyone can achieve their potential. So again, that's kind of the quality that you have on the other side, is seeing the equality of all beings, that we all have Buddha nature equally and all have therefore the same potential. It says an obstruction to an aspect of practice understanding the true state, but this is really two obstructions, because as we saw when we went through them initially, there's the superimposition and the deprecation. So let's take a look at how these are explained in two verses, actually, not one for one and one for the other, but they're actually both explained in each of these. By not understanding, they will be at fault, verse 164. In the mind of those who do not see the basic element, knowledge of reality does not arise. In other words, you have to see the emptiness of the mind and see the Buddha nature, which is the lack of inherent existence of the mind and all of what is defiling the mind. We are never going to be able to develop that knowledge of reality until we see that emptiness of the mind. Therefore, clinging to the incorrect, they do not realize the perfect reality. So we could even say that this first part of this, clinging to the incorrect, is referring to superimposition. Clinging to the incorrect view of inherent existence is the superimposition part of it. Then the other fault of deprecation is the last part, not realizing the perfect reality, not able to get their heads around lack of inherent existence because they deprecate existence when they equate the two, when they're not to be equated. Inherent existence is not mere existence. Okay, so Gyaltsab Je says, in their minds, they do not develop, for the sake of all sentient beings, the perfect consciousness that realizes the true state. Therefore, by holding the false to exist by their own nature, that's the superimposition, holding on to things existing in the way that they appear, they hold to the imperfect and do not realize the perfect reality of the false not existing by their own nature. Because again, the tendency is when you think of things not existing by their own nature, you fall into the other pit hole, the other extreme of deprecation, of deprecating mere existence. And so they cannot find the perfect reality because they are holding erroneous views, thinking again that the superimposition of an inherent existence is perfectly fine, and they don't question it. And if you say that it doesn't exist, then things don't exist at all. Right? So then, what's interesting from this is so for some reason in our text, verse 165 is missing. So that's why I queued this up. Let's see where it is. There it is. The root verses. This is the verse that we're going to see as a second verse in this section. Because of being formed and adventitious, the faults of sentient beings are not real, meaning they don't have inherent existence. They're adventitious, formed from their causes and conditions. Again, talked about just a short while ago the causes that lead to an affliction arising, such as anger. You have to have the seeds of anger, then you meet with an object of your anger, and then you have the inappropriate attention that creates the thoughts that support the arisal of anger. And those things cause those anger and other afflictions to be formed. They're adventitious. So the faults of sentient beings are not real in the way that, again, the mind of ignorance adheres to them. The perfect qualities of the basic element are pure in their nature because the faults are selfless. Again, because the faults are selfless, well, therefore, then, all phenomena are selfless. And in the space of removing the faults, the perfect qualities can be fully developed and brought to the forefront. We even talked in one of the earlier sections on the 10 presentations about the indivisibility of the qualities and the Buddha nature, and again, how what we are looking at with this is a sense of, again, once more, the deprecation that happens if we think that things are real and adhere, the superimposition that happens when we think that things are real and adhere to inherent existence. And then if we think that somehow making things selfless is going to also do away with any of the qualities because things can't exist at all, well, then that's a deprecation. So the superimposition of inherent existence, the deprecation of non-existence, these things are not what's being taught. We're talking about, again, the perfect middle way between those two extremes. So the meaning of that verse that we just looked at is that faults of sentient beings, such as desire, do not truly exist because they are adventitious and newly formed by circumstance, particularly, again, by the ignorance that grasps at true existence that doesn't exist. This is so because they are of dependent origination. And dependent arising is said to be one of the best proofs of emptiness because it shows that things actually do arise depending upon their causes and conditions, their parts, even by, again, mere designation and imputation. If things depend upon other things, they cannot have an independent, autonomous, true existence. And then the second part of it, the perfect qualities, such as the 10 powers and so on, are naturally pure because the faults are without a naturally existent self. Again, this is what allows for these qualities to be fully developed, to become manifest, is through the emptiness of the inherent of the mind, the self, whatever. Minds do not have inherent existence, or if they did, none of these qualities could develop. They're naturally pure. It's kind of interesting. One of the things that I often hear that gets to this whole kind of debate of, are sentient beings kind of inherently good? Well, again, there's no inherent existence at all, but when it comes down to it, what is the nature of beings? Are they in the nature of love and kindness and what have you? We even have this phrase of like the better angels of our nature. Like if it came down to it, we had to rely upon people to kind of act from their very basis. Would they be good or would they be evil? And of course, the view of Buddha nature leans towards sentient beings being good. But once more, we have to also understand that it doesn't mean that all of these amazing qualities that a Buddha has are already there and we're just kind of removing something and they immediately manifest. We still have to engage in all the behavior that causes these qualities to develop. Just day in and day out, working on our minds so that we increase our compassion, our love, our patience, our generosity, what have you. These things are not completely formed, but they, again, contrary, remember I was talking about the roots of ignorance and the various parts of the trunk that come up out of that. The non-virtuous states of mind cannot survive without the root of ignorance. This is where this analogy isn't perfect. The virtuous states of mind, which is everything that will lead you to being this incredibly beneficent, wonderful, compassionate, kind, loving Buddha being, all of that can survive without ignorance. And in fact, it is supported in truth. It's not something that is denied, unlike the adventitious defilements that can be denied and overcome by seeing that things lack inherent existence. By seeing things lack inherent existence and realizing emptiness, you actually strengthen and support all these positive qualities. So we can't say again that these positive qualities are kind of there inherently either. They also are dependent arisings. They also are dependent upon us creating the causes and conditions for them. But they are capable of being developed to an infinite degree because of emptiness. That's what we mean by the whole thing of Buddha nature, being able to develop your mind all the way to this wonderful, magnanimous being that we call a Buddha on the basis of emptiness. Without emptiness, that transformation could not occur. It would be impossible. All right. So let's go back to our text, and that was the two that we had in regard to the third and fourth faults. The fifth fault has to do with this mind of self-cherishing, self-centeredness that is a block to our developing the great love and great compassion that embraces all beings through cherishing them. So we have two outlines here for this: the general drawbacks of not knowing the basic element. And it says here in 166, those who cling to unreal faults and deprecate true qualities. In other words, those people who cannot find that middle way that we were just talking about do not attain the love that sees themselves and sentient beings as equal, that is able to exchange the benefit of others for the tendency we have to solely benefit ourselves. So again, we can see how wisdom even informs that more conventional mind of cherishing others and abandoning self-cherishing, because most of our self-cherishing is done with the mind that is clinging to inherent existence, thinking there's inherently existent self and other and what have you. So let's see what Gyaltsab Je says here in his commentary at the bottom there. By holding faults to exist by their own natures, again, that's the superimposition, and deprecating the perfect qualities, referring to the natural emptiness of the potential to develop the dharmas of the Buddhas, they will not see that there is no difference between oneself and others in the possession of the lineage of the Buddha and in the ability to attain enlightenment. They will not generate the love that wishes for, go to the next page, wishes for others to meet happiness, and the compassion that longs for others to be freed of suffering that comes from the practice of cherishing others more than oneself. It's kind of interesting. We often talk about these as being somewhat separate wings, right? We have that wing of wisdom that we've been mostly looking at in this teaching throughout this whole course of developing the wisdom of emptiness that overcomes the adventitious defilements, that is the true nature of the mind and what have you. But then over on this side, we talk about, the compassion and all these practices that support our getting to enlightenment. But they do feed each other. If we have the realization of the middle way view of the lack of inherent existence of self and other, then once more, there's no basis upon which to delineate self importance and my need for me to take care of my own happiness and well-being more than to take care of the happiness and well-being of others. Master Shantideva in his text, you're going to be going to studying next year again with Ross Moore, Dr. Ross, which I hope you continue to enjoy and find great benefit from that study. There's in the it's in the 6th chapter when we're talking, I think it is the 6th chapter, maybe the 8th chapter. I think it's the 8th chapter. I'm sorry, the 8th chapter, when he's going through the meditation on equalizing and exchanging self and others. He talks about, again, why do we tend to delineate self only as pertaining to this collection of stuff? It's an incorrect mind. Why do we not think of others as being self? He uses the example of, if you have a thorn in your foot, your hand doesn't say, oh, well, that doesn't concern me, so I'm not going to pull the thorn out of my foot. The hand's just fine, right? So why should it get involved in pulling the thorn out of the foot? And the point is that because it's suffering exists. Suffering exists, therefore it has to be alleviated regardless of whether it's happening to you or to someone else, to kind of get out of the narrow view that our ignorance influences us to have, to think that it's only us that matters. So you'll get into that when you get to chapter 8, which I guess you have a little ways to go before you get there with Dr. Ross. But um, that's kind of the emptiness teachings do play a role in this. Why do we tend to just kind of exclude this sense of self to, or confine this sense of self to just what happens in this little sphere of experience? If we begin to really see that we are all of this. I mean, if we think that way, there's nothing that is inherently me here. So why can't I think that there's a me that goes beyond here? Why can't I label everyone else me? Why can't I have the same regard for others that I currently have for myself? The emptiness teachings definitely help us to kind of move beyond that circle of limited self-concern and embrace concern for all beings. Then we have a consequence in this verse 167. Upon hearing it in this way, that the self-cherishing mind doesn't really make sense and we need to cherish others, one then generates enthusiasm, the same respect for others as for the Buddhas, the wisdom, the exalted wisdom, and the great love, and of course, great compassion that is accompanied. By the way, great love and great compassion go beyond mere love and compassion, and that love and compassion are the wish for beings to be happy and the wish for them to not suffer, respectively. Great love and great compassion go further in saying that I will be the agent of doing that. I will place beings in happiness. I will free beings from suffering. So let's look at what Gyaltsab Je says here on this. The disciple who hears that the lineage of the Buddha nature, exists in all sentient beings, will develop the joy of wishing to become a Buddha, will respect others as if they were Buddhas, giving that same accord to other beings as you do to the Buddhas, the same respect, will develop the wisdom that knows that faults do not exist by their own natures, will develop the deep wisdom that understands the potential to develop every Dharma of the Buddhas, and will generate the great love and great compassion as described above. So if we get all of what was shared, and of course, especially this last one, kind of overcoming our tendency to be narrowly focused on ourselves and generate bodhicitta, the mind that embraces the welfare of all beings through cherishing others, then we will definitely move in that direction, right? So then we have a summary of the benefits of being free of the 5 faults, giving us kind of the 5 qualities that we will have on the basis of having abandoned these through our study of Buddha nature, as we've done in this course. Through generating these 5 qualities of lack of self-contempt, which again helps us to overcome or is the problem that we are that we currently might have in regard to our own ability to become a Buddha, the view of equality, uh, the again, so the let me start over. Lack of self-contempt. Self-contempt again is the problem that we have that can be gotten rid of through studying Buddha nature and come to see that we can achieve Buddhahood. The view of equality, that all beings equally have Buddha nature, not just us, who are some kind of the privileged Mahayana few or whatever. The third, lack of faults, being endowed with qualities. Again, that we don't have any of the fault of adhering to inherent existence, which is the superimposition, and we become endowed with qualities because we aren't deprecating the existence of those qualities. So that's the third and the fourth. And fifth, the love arising from the equality of oneself and sentient beings. The love or cherishing of others. Again, it's not excluding compassion by saying love. It's all of that mindset that embraces the welfare of other beings, seeing again that we're all equal, especially through the wisdom teachings that sees that there's no essential difference, substantial difference between self and others. They're mere designations, mere imputations. Okay, so back to Gyaltsab Je. In the mind of that disciple, these 5 qualities, which summarize the Mahayana path, are developed. Consequently, there's no fault of self-contempt. The view that oneself and all other sentient beings are similar in possessing the ability to attain enlightenment is developed. That's the second one again. The faults are seen as not existing by their own natures. The potential for the development of qualities is realized because it's not deprecated. Those are part of the nature. Love, finally, the fifth one, is developed by seeing the equality of self and others in the ability to attain enlightenment, and by developing the stages of the Mahayana path, that disciple swiftly achieves the state of a perfect Buddha. Now, Geshe Jumpo Gyaltsen in his commentary says it does say swiftly here, but don't think that that's what it means in terms of this is a arduous and difficult path. And most of us know this already. We're not going to kind of sign up and think, oh, I'll become a Buddha in 5 days then. This is a path that takes great stamina, great courage, great determination, perseverance. But if we come to recognize this through our study of Buddha nature, again, that these 5 faults, there's no room for them. Self-contempt, that's doesn't need to be there because we absolutely have Buddha nature. You can become a Buddha too. The fault of seeing that others don't have it and developing some sort of false pride on the basis of that. Well, no, everyone has Buddha nature. So we have to embrace the equality of all beings in that regard. And then, of course, ridding ourselves of the superimposition, the deprecation that are the 2 extremes, the faults that we can get into in terms of our view of emptiness. And then finally, generating the great love that is the antidote and the great compassion, the antidote to our mind that tends to be narrowly focused on our own welfare. So, all right, we're getting there. I don't have too much more to go through in the text here. Let's go to the next page where we actually have the conclusion. Chapter 10, the name of the chapter. Remember that this is the first of the 4 chapters of this text, and we're not studying the other 3. They're not part of this course, though you can find commentaries on them if you wish to pursue them. But in this, Gyaltsab ends this section saying, from the Mahayana Uttara Tantra treatise, the lineages of the 3 jewels, this has been the chapter on the Tathagata essence. Again, the whole chapter had to do with the 3 jewels and the Tathagata essence as being the first 4 of the vajra topics, the vajra points. But here he's concluding this section because this is obviously the largest section of this first chapter. In the commentary, meaning in a Sangha's commentary that Gyaltsab is commenting on, first verse, which he mentions something about the first verse, means that the explanation of the Tathagata essence outlined by the verse beginning, because the activities of the Dharmakaya are pervasive. Remember that verse 27 that I told you that would be very good to memorize? Here it is again. Remember that it said, because the activities of the Dharmakaya are pervasive. That's the first of the 3 reasons why Buddha nature exists. Because suchness is indifferentiable, because the emptiness of our minds and that of a Buddha's mind and all beings' minds are identical. And third, because of having the lineage, because of having a developmental quality to our minds, all sentient beings always have the Buddha essence, always have Buddha nature. Again, it wasn't all on the screen there, just the first line. But that's the one that is being referred to because that was the start of the section on Tathagata essence, on Buddha nature. First could also mean first chapter, but I think this is more correct. What started the first chapter, maybe I'll read it at the end. It's kind of auspicious to end study of a text by going back to the beginning and reading the first verse, but I'll do that later. So then he says essentially here, that one little sentence, suchness with defilement has been explained. Remember what suchness with defilement was referring to? It was referring to the Buddha nature. Remember, we do have that chart. Let me see if I can find where I put that. No, not there. We had it on the screen a short while ago. Hope I didn't somehow make it disappear. No, that's not it. That's something I want to talk about later. There it is. Okay. Remember this chart. This is the 7 vajra points, 7 vajra topics. Okay, this is the entire structure to our text. Chapter 1 is everything that's on the screen right there. The first 4 topics. The resultant 3 jewels to be achieved by yourself, the ultimate goal that you want to achieve, which is to become the Buddha jewel, the Dharma jewel, and the Sangha jewel for other beings. And again, I won't go through all of the things that we went through previously about what is the ultimate, what is the conventional. But the main topic we've been studying is the 4th one, the basic element or our Buddha nature. That's the substantial cause, as it says there on the left, that will bring about your achievement. the basis for you to achieve the desired goal of becoming the three jewels, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And remember that it is, in terms of its ultimate nature, the emptiness of sentient beings' minds, the suchness of sentient beings' minds is the same synonym for that, which possess defilements and stains. Suchness with defilement. That's what we mean at the deepest level of what our Buddha nature is. It's your emptiness of your mind that is together with defilement, whereas once you've removed all the defilement, you have the emptiness of the mind of a Buddha that is also together with that purity, freedom from all those adventitious stains, those defilements. And then the conventional, of course, is one we haven't maybe talked about as much, but it's the power or energy in the minds of sentient beings, which has the ability to develop transcendental knowledge, which has the ability to fully evolve into the mind of a Buddha. And of course, a lot of what we were talking about just tonight in terms of these qualities of great love and great compassion feed into that. So, suchness with defilement has now been explained, the substantial cause for your attainment of Buddhahood and becoming the three jewels for all beings. Then it says here the meanings of the Srimala Devi. Remember that name? That was one of the sutras that also teaches Buddha nature. And the Tathagata Essence Sutra, Tathagata Garbha Sutra, as it's called in the Sanskrit, have been clearly and simply explained from the teachings of the Noble Lamas in accord with the commentaries of the Father and Son. The Father and Son, I didn't see a comment on that. It could be, again, the father of Tsongkhapa and his spiritual sons who are Kendrip-je and Gyaltsab-je, but it's kind of weird for him to talk about himself in that, the Father and the Son. The commentaries of Tsongkhapa on emptiness, and then, of course, Gyaltsab-je on this topic, but I don't know for sure what that's referring to. Then it says, this has been the first chapter of the commentary on this treatise that explains the thinking of the Mahayana definitive sutras, which, as we've seen, is really what is being discussed in this sutra. Remember, again, the third turning of the wheel of Dharma also contains other sutras in it, that, such as the Sutra Unraveling the Thought, that are held to be the basis for mind-only tenets, which is not the view of emptiness that the Buddha taught in the second wheel turning. In the second wheel turning, the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, the Buddha taught the lack of inherent existence of all phenomena, not what mind only teaches. But within the third wheel turning was also the Tathagata Garbha Sutra, this sutra that does teach the same definitive meaning. It's not teaching anything different. All right. Okay, so I wanted to share just a little bit of extra stuff that is not in your text, but I think is worthwhile having. And this won't be anything on any sort of, the exam, if you are going to take the exam or the test for this course. This is some additional things that came from Geshe Loden's book that I've been quoting quite liberally throughout this course. He divides this how to practice Buddha potential. And I think it's a nice way to conclude our teachings on this with some kind of practical advice. The means for awakening the potential is the first topic he talks about. So it says here, properly taking heartfelt refuge in the three jewels is a means for awakening your Buddha potential. In order to awaken the potential, it is necessary to both accumulate a great deal of merit and purify obstructions. Of course, these two tasks we know day in and day out we need to be involved in creating, accumulating merit, positive energy, and purifying our negativities, obstructions, what have you. This is accomplished in great measure through taking refuge. Taking refuge itself is a very powerful antidote to a lot of the faults in the mind and helps us to create great merit towards the three jewels by placing our refuge in them. Then you also have meditation on the four signs of awakening the potential as a means. This will also help, first of all, to meditate on great compassion. And I would, accompany great mind with that. Strong belief in the Mahayana, developing a deep conviction in this Mahayana path that leads to the ultimate goal of Buddhahood. Third, having a mind of patience. Again, patience we haven't talked about at all really during this whole course, but having a patience that is of the threefold nature, patience towards the experiences that we have that are undesirable, that are painful, the patience that we have in the face of receiving harm from others, and then the patience we have in our practice of the Dharma. All of that contributes to your moving in this direction, awakening your Mahayana lineage. And then, of course, joyous effort, enthusiasm. All of these will also contribute to accumulation and purification, and thus to the awakening of the potential. I might just share with you really briefly at this point where my teacher in Italy, when he was teaching on Buddha nature, actually did talk about these four. So let me put that on the screen. It says here the sign of having activated the Mahayana lineage, and it says the signs of having activated the Mahayana lineage are of four types, 1 through 4. They're the top list. Before joining the actual Mahayana path, one already has intense compassion observing all sentient beings. So again, even before you've generated bodhicitta and before maybe even finding the Mahayana path, you've got some great compassion. Well, this is a sign that your lineage is awakening, that you are moving in the right direction to activate your Buddha potential, your developmental potential. Secondly, strong belief in the Mahayana Dharma, not really different from what Geshe Loden said. 3, patience in bearing hardships for others' welfare. Kind of dealing with the reality of how this Dharma path is not an easy one. It's not meant to be an easy path. It's something we really have to work hard at and bearing hardships for. 4th, striving in the virtuous activities. Again, that joyous effort, such as generosity, these activities of the victor's sons, the bodhisattvas, the victor's children. So again, these are another way of presenting those, but we see that those factors, meditating on those, practicing those, cultivating those are really important. And by your studying with Dr. Ross, the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, you are moving in the right direction in terms of studying all those topics. Chapter 6 will study patience, 7 will be joyous effort, and so on. You get much exposure to the Mahayana Dharma by studying that text. The signs of awakening the potential. This is a second section in Geshe Loden's text. When hearing of the disadvantages of samsara and the great benefits of liberation causes tears to come to the eyes and the hairs of the body to stand on end, such special signs can be taken as an indication that the Hinayana potential has been awakened, because some beings do have a potential to move through the Hinayana path first. And then, of course, they will eventually have to enter the Mahayana. We did see these kind of signs earlier in one of the presentations, but here this is just a separate piece that's talking about when you know that your potential is being awakened, perhaps. When, before having entered the path, hearing the vast and profound Dharma, of course, of the Mahayana, causes tears to come to the eyes and the hairs of the body to stand on end, then such special signs can be taken as an indication that the Mahayana potential has been awakened, right? Because when we hear about the great compassion of the bodhisattvas and everything that's involved in the Mahayana path, and we have those kinds of reactions, this is a sign that we've activated the movement in that direction. That's not just for the Hinayana result of self-liberation, but the Mahayana result of complete Buddhahood. Continuing, it says, a quote from the Sutra of 10 Phenomena says, "From the smoke, one knows fire. Seeing the crane, one knows the presence of water. The wise bodhisattva's potential is known from these signs." So without directly seeing fire, smoke rising above a mountain will show clearly the existence of fire on the other side of the mountain. Also, a traveler searching for water correctly knows that the presence of a fish-eating crane indicates the existence of a lake or a river nearby, right? Because what is that bird eating if it's, if there isn't a lake or pond or whatever where it can get fish? In the same way, without directly perceiving the awakening of the Buddha potential, one can correctly know that the potential is awakened by other signs, again, signs of devotional response, of tears to the eyes and hairs on end and what have you, when hearing the vast and profound Mahayana Dharma. Again, things can be a little deceptive, but nonetheless, if we see these in ourselves, it's a good sign that we are moving in the right direction, that these teachings are awakening our own Buddha potential. A third topic, how to lead others after awakening one's potential. After awakening one's Buddha potential, not meaning when you become a Buddha, but when you've awakened the potential to start moving in that direction, developing your mind towards Buddhahood, one should train properly in the paths of the three scopes of the Lam Rim, stages of the path. again, which I don't need to reiterate for all of you. I'm sure you're aware of those three taught in all the Lamrim texts. First developing again a wish to be to get a good rebirth, then a wish to be free of samsara. Those two are similar to the Hinayanas, and then the wish to become a Buddha and the practices that follow for each of those three levels of motivation. So he continues, he said, one should then teach those with Hinayana potential from the Hinayana basket of teachings and lead them into these paths because that's what they need. That's what our job is as someone who's a Mahayanist, is to help others to have what they need. One should teach the vast and profound, the Mahayana Dharma, to those whose Mahayana potential is awakening and lead them into Mahayana paths. Though generally a rapid path, the Mahayana is not a quick path for those with Hinayana potential, right? Because they're in the wrong path. This is because such trainees will find they will be unable to hold their bodhicitta commitment purely and will come to break their Mahayana commitments. So we have to be careful not teaching the Mahayana to those who may have an inclination towards the Hinayana. The negativity and obstructions which they create for themselves by giving up bodhicitta will take them further from enlightenment than if they traverse the Hinayana first and then enter the Mahayana. Because we've talked about those beings, right? That they attain the state of arhatship, they've abandoned all the obstructions to liberation, but they still have the obstructions to omniscience to remove, and they have to come into the Mahayana path and do that work. Continuing the same section, it says, from the point of view of individual trainees, then, we cannot classify the Mahayana as superior and the Hinayana as inferior or vice versa. For the Hinayanist, Hinayana is best. For the Mahayanist, Mahayana is best for achieving enlightenment rapidly. If they both take their proper path, they will both achieve enlightenment eventually, and you won't be delaying anyone. So don't train beings in a path that is not conducive to their minds. For example, each particular disease requires its own particular medicine for a cure to be effected. In this way, no medicine is inherently better than any other. The doctor must be sure, however, to prescribe the medicine which is best able to cure the individual patient's disease, right? Don't misprescribe, because otherwise beings won't be cured. Giving liver medicine for a kidney disease will not help, even though it's of excellent quality, and may even result from the latest advance in medical technology. In the same way, the Buddha taught four main schools of philosophy to suit the inclinations and capability of trainees. Remember, this is the tenet systems of the Vaibhashika, Sautrantika, Chittamatra, and Madhyamika, the middle way, that is said to be the most profound view, but you have to teach people according to where they're at, not give them inappropriate medicine. For example, though not the highest and most sophisticated view, the Buddha taught that all phenomena are merely the nature of mind. He saw that this view, which is the basis of the mind only, the Chittamatra school, would be the most rapid way for some to eventually realize the highest view. Again, everything he taught was with upaya, skillful means. And this is why, teachings that might even contradict each other exist in the Buddha's teachings, but that's skillful means because some beings will need those teachings to get to the higher view. The Descent into Lanka Sutra, this is actually, I think, a sutra that's also part of the third wheel turning. It says, like medicine is given to suit individual patients by a doctor, so mind only has been extensively proclaimed to sentient beings by the Buddha. It's a form of medicine, so don't denigrate mind only. Even, we're talking about Hinayana versus Mahayana, but within the Mahayana, there's Chittamatra, mind only. You can't denigrate that because it's a skillful means of the Buddha. Okay, then the benefits of awakening the potential, a fourth section in that part of his book. The special benefits of awakening the potential are that the mind aspiring for enlightenment will become very stable. Joyous effort will increase greatly. Dharma practice will become the sole essence of everything that you do, and you will be quickly liberated from the lower realms and so forth. Good advertisement, right? If you send me 1995 before midnight tonight, I'll throw in the bamboo rice cooker as well. But anyway, these are the benefits that, we often hear this in regard to the Buddha's teachings, that we understand if we awaken our potential through following these practices, meditating on those topics earlier, we will have things fall into place. Doesn't mean it's going to be like easy peasy and we're not going to have to put any effort into it. Just means that everything will grow commensurately. All right, that's it. I thought I would share those because I think they're kind of inspiring after all of this technical stuff we've been dealing with here. I'm going to realign my camera again. Maybe it's a little clearer there. I wanted to touch on a few things that came up while we were going through this course that I hadn't had a time to kind of pursue. I think Sean had brought up earlier, some classes ago when I was in at my mom's in Indianapolis, about this meditation on ugliness. And so I've got a handout that I will get to Venerable Dundrup to post out there. Let me put it on the screen just so that you have that. That is right here. It's like 3 pages from master's program transcripts when I was in Italy studying. You see right there at the top, meditation on ugliness. How does one meditate on ugliness as the antidote to attachment? By the way, this topic is taught often in like various meditation texts as part of one of the 4 objects, general categories of objects for meditation of calm abiding. And this one is part of what's called objects for purifying behavior, where if we are really strongly driven by attachment, that this meditation on ugliness is one of the main ones that is taught. I'm not going to go through the whole meditation tonight. I just want to mention it's again about 3 pages and goes into some detail about how to do this with regard to bodies in particular. When you study Shantideva, if you haven't studied it before, chapter 8, he does do this as well. And of course, being a monk teaching to an audience of monks, he uses a woman's body as the example, but any gender's body or any body whatsoever can be used equally, because we can come to see that what we are adhering to in terms of a view of that body and what the mind of attachment is doing in superimposing all of this beauty there is false. That actually what we're looking at is a pretty disgusting bag of filth, as I think it's called in one translation. So you will run into that again in Master Shantideva's text as well, where he goes through some verses, and there's some nice ways to meditate using that. But anyway, that will be available to you. I'll make sure I get that to Venerable Dundrup so he can post it out on the materials page, the course materials page, sometime soon. I also remember Sean, I think it was as well, mentioned this dark retreat, and I wasn't able to find out much more than what's on the internet. I didn't have a chance to talk to anyone else. But again, it does seem to have some relation to Dzogchen practice. Maybe, again, I guess my only advice based on what I've seen is this is, again, said to be a very elevated form of practice for senior students who've had a lot of meditation practice. So I wouldn't encourage people running off to do a dark retreat without properly preparing oneself. And hopefully the people that you're signing up to do this with, or facilities where they do this, are doing an investigation ahead of time to make sure that you're qualified to do that. Because I don't know, I mean, it sounds similar to like things that were done in the 60s around deprivation tanks and things like that. And some people actually did have some pretty unfavorable experiences in being in a place where their senses are not active because it's entirely dark and there's no kind of tactile sensation even necessarily that's being activated. There's no, I don't know. I just didn't find out much more, but I just wanted to give that little caution, which I'm sure you're all aware of already. We also did touch briefly in the last class, or maybe 2 classes ago, I don't remember. I think it was last class, about when in Sautrantika, when they are realizing selflessness, we got into a little discussion about generally characterized phenomena versus specifically characterized phenomena. I wasn't able to find out much more about, I don't know, kind of what's entailed in the realization, but I just wanted to reiterate what I did say last time by quoting a little bit from Cutting Through Appearances, this book on the tenet systems. At least half of the book is on the tenet systems. And this is from page 245 on the Sutra School on Sautrantika. And it says, because the appearing object of direct perception must be a specifically characterized object. This is the whole point of this school, is they say what is specifically characterized can only be known through direct perception, such as the physical things in our world, that takes in all of the specific characteristics of those objects. And that's the reality, is that according to them, is that things that are known by a direct perceiver are specifically characterized phenomena. You can't have generally characterized phenomena known by a direct perceiver. Okay. And emptiness or selflessness is a generally characterized phenomenon. So it can't be known by a direct perceiver in their school. Again, the higher schools don't have a problem saying that a direct perception, a yogic direct perception, realizes emptiness, even though it's a generally characterized phenomenon. but this school does. So anyway, it says here, because the appearing object of direct perception must be a specifically characterized object, the proponents of sutra, the Sautrantikas, do not assert that the subtle selflessness of persons is the object of the mode of apprehension by an uninterrupted path of a hearer's or anyone's path of seeing. So again, this subtle selflessness that they're adhering to is our coarse selflessness in Prasangika. It's that selflessness of a substantially existent, self-sufficient person. But that's again what all those schools say is necessary to become an arhat. So the hearer that goes into meditation on selflessness does not realize selflessness directly because they can only know specifically characterized phenomena directly. And selflessness being a negation is a generally characterized phenomenon. Okay, so it says this is because they assert that the subtle selflessness of persons is realized implicitly by hearers and so forth through explicit comprehension of compositional phenomena, meaning the mental and physical aggregates that are devoid of a self of persons. So they are knowing the specifically characterized phenomena of the aggregates, but they are realizing implicitly the selflessness of those aggregates, that there is no self-sufficient, substantially existent self there. It's a weird concept to get our heads around, but this is what's required by their view, that only specifically characterized phenomena can be known by a direct perceiver, and generally characterized phenomena have to be known implicitly, through a conceptual awareness. Yeah, Stephen, please.
Yeah, thank you for that explanation, Don. I might have heard it before, but that was a while back.
Okay,
And
good.
in one of those weird Buddhist synchronicity events, we were just covering that in another class in illuminating the intent. So
Oh,
it's kind of
good.
amazing that it came up.
Uh-huh.
And specifically and generally characterized, from what I remember of that, specifically and generally characterized are also synonymous with impermanent and permanent phenomena,
Exactly. Yeah,
and also manifest and hidden phenomena.
right. It's well worth studying tenets to be able to, and again, to then recall your study. That's always the challenge because we study so many things. But the tenets course of basic program is well worth studying because you get kind of the ins and outs of all of this. There's like 7 topics for each of the various schools, the 4 main ones, and then of course some of them have sub schools as well. Well worth studying just to get clear about all the various points of view that they have, how they hold things. Whoops, hit it twice there. And to be able to clarify some of these philosophical points. Again, some of them are still a bit puzzling to kind of fully get. Sautrantika actually supports a lot of the tenets within that around cognition and everything are supported, of course, by Prasangika and Yamaka, but not everything. And a lot of what Vaibhashika even teaches, the lowest school, is embraced by Prasangika and Yamaka. So it's well worth engaging in that study, and it's not a horribly long study. I think I usually teach it in, I don't know, maybe a little less time than even what I taught this in. I'm not sure. I don't remember exactly, but so there's more information on the next page, page 246, but I think you've gotten it. He does say here, an emptiness is an uncompounded phenomenon, again, permanent, unchanging, therefore not a specifically characterized phenomenon. Since an emptiness cannot be cognized directly, it is asserted that a yogic direct perception does not explicitly cognize selflessness. Rather, again, it cognizes the mind and body as no longer qualified with such a self. Thus, it is compounded phenomena, the mental and physical aggregates that are directly cognized, and thereby the emptiness of a self of persons is implicitly realized. Again, kind of hard to get our heads around what that all looks like, but or is, what the realization of that is. But a direct perception, a yogic direct perceiver still exists in Sautrantika. They just say it's not knowing selflessness directly in the way that we say it does. Again, the experience that I've mentioned many times is when you have that yogic direct perception in meditative equipoise, emptiness and the mind knowing emptiness are like fresh water poured into fresh water. I mean, there's no differentiation of those two. That's a conventional designation of subject and object, and so nothing conventional appears to the mind. Only emptiness, only this voidness, as we were talking about earlier, which cannot really be expressed completely in terms of that experience, but nonetheless can be known through inferential cognition, through our reasoning consciousness. I think that was everything I wanted to share, other than I did start reading a bit more of this Buddha Dharma magazine. The fall edition that I mentioned had some articles on Buddha nature. And there's some interesting stuff even in the very first article, where it actually, one thing I'll share with you before we do a little discussion, he says he went to a Zen retreat once where the teacher actually got up in front of the group. This was a combination of like Theravadan practitioners, Tibetan Buddhist practitioners, whoever. And he said to all of them in a loud and solemn voice, "You are all Buddhas." And coming from a Zen point of view, maybe that's, I don't know that he was meaning it literally, but he was alluding to Buddha nature, that we all have that. So he says, many years after the Zen retreat, while studying at Oxford, and I in this case is this, the author of this is Lopen Karma Punso, who is, I think in the, I don't know what exact tradition he is, maybe the Kagyu, I'm not sure. Sadra Foundation is what he's part of. It says here he came across the well-known passage in the Anguttara Nikaya in the Pali Canon, which is kind of interesting. We keep alluding to all this Sanskrit stuff in the Mahayana canon, in which the Buddha declares, luminous bhikkhus is this mind, but it is defiled by adventitious defilements. It's kind of interesting that, even in the Pali canon, there's some allusion to this essence of Buddha nature, that at least the main teaching that we had in this course, again, because there were the two main points, the clear light nature of the mind that the 10 presentations was mainly elucidating, and then the adventitious nature of the defilements, which the 9 similes was mainly explaining. So even that Pali canon has some reference to this adventitious defilements, which again, but of course, the teaching on emptiness in the second wheel turning was not exclusive to that wheel turning. You can find some passages in the Pali Canon that are the same emptiness. There's course reviews of emptiness, of course, as well, but the emptiness of inherent existence was also taught, not as explicitly and extensively as it was in the second wheel turning, but it is still there. So, all right, Stephen, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Don. Yeah, one of those Pali Sutras is the Lump of Foam Sutra,
I don't
which,
know this one.
yeah, and it talks about that same thing. You can read it definitely from a Madhyamaka perspective.
And what's the name of it again?
The Lump of Foam Sutra.
Lump of foam. Maybe I've seen it with a different name, perhaps. Yeah, I mean, it's possible. Yeah, because I know there's references to
Yeah.
this in some of the studies where they talk about, that the Buddha even taught this, because there are other times when the Buddha was saying like the person is the carrier and the aggregates are the load, which seems to be even asserting that there's a substantially existent self-sufficient person, in some of the Pali Sutras. But that's why, again, different teachings for different beings. But
And
okay.
you mentioned, like just towards the end of the teaching, Don, you
Mhm.
mentioned the father and the son. And there is a sutra called the meeting of the father,
Yeah,
where
I know of
Buddha
this
meets
sutra.
his father. And it's also it comes up in one of the headings in the
Mhm.
middle length Lam Rim, but it doesn't really say anything about the father and son. It just says it's talking about showing that this manner of identifying ignorance as the apprehension of true existence is asserted by the noble father and son. And it just says this was taught by the noble father and son. It's not capitalized like a sutra would be.
Right, exactly. That's why it doesn't look like it's from a
Yeah.
sutra, as opposed to referring to perhaps two beings. But
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know if Gyaltsab referred to Tsongkhapa as his spiritual father. I mean, if he used that term, we often talk about, Tsongkhapa and his two sons, implying that he's sort of the spiritual father of these Kedrupje and Gyaltsab. So I'm just speculating again. I didn't see anything. But as you start the discussion, I will look back at my commentary just to make sure that there's nothing that I missed.
Yeah. And of
The
course, my
comment.
final comment is, the famous saying, um, luminous beings are we, not this crude matter.
By the great Master
The
Yoda.
Bodhisattva from Dagobah.
in
Just thought I'd
the
get that in there.
in the Empire Strikes Back Sutra. Okay.
Your
So
Yoda is much better than mine, Don.
yes, it is. Much better, yes. Okay, so tonight the questions are from the last quiz because or last homework because you did start discussing this, but we didn't get to the what it says in 162 to 166 for the first question. That kind of how the teaching on Buddha nature helps you to overcome that. I mean, it's a bit obvious because it's pretty much the opposite of the five faults, but nonetheless, I wanted people to engage in a full discussion of the five faults with regard to the verses 162 through 166 that dispel those. And then the second question, which we didn't get to at all because we hadn't covered those in regard to the second of the two arguments, what is explained in verses 159 and 160. So again, yeah, the first of the two arguments in this presentation then is the no purpose argument. And the second is the contradiction argument, that there's a contradiction. Again, you guys can explain that or discuss that. Sound good? Okay, take it off screen. All right. So I will kind of be in the background and doing some things here, and I'll come in about, I don't know, 20 minutes, a little less than 20 minutes, and see where everything's at. Okay. Well, okay, so for auspiciousness sake, I'm going to just real quickly go back to the very beginning of this text and just read the first three verses. And again, you can reflect on this and see what retention you have of when we went through these way back 6 months ago. Buddha, Dharma, assembly, basic element, enlightenment, excellent qualities, and finally, enlightened activities. The body of the entire treatise is condensed into these 7 vajra points. These 7 are presented by way of their characteristics and order following the questions of King Dharmaneshvara Sutra. The first 3 points should be known from the introduction, and the latter 4 points from the divisions of the intelligent ones and the victors. From Buddha, the Dharma. From the Dharma, the assembly of Aryas. From the assembly, the Tathagata essence. Exalted wisdom is attained upon the ending of the element. Attainment of this exalted wisdom is attaining supreme enlightenment, endowed with attributes of powers and so on that bring forth the welfare of all sentient beings. The nice verses to end the class on. So any final questions or comments before we dedicate? Again, know that I'll be in touch with you sometime very shortly about the exam and all of that, and try to give you, again, pretty straightforward way of doing it. It does involve some memorization and working with things, but I know you can do it. So.
And how long do you have to prepare?
Pardon?
How long are you given to prepare for the test?
Oh, as much as you want. I mean, I would like to when I finish a subject, I don't like it to go on forever, so that like suddenly, a year from now, I get Sean's text and I go, Sean's test shows up in my email, and I go, I got to put myself all the way back in that material. But so I would encourage, like when I finally do send things out, maybe take about 2 months or something to be able to get it back to me completed. And if you do it sooner, that's fine. If you do it later, that's okay. And if you find that something came up in those 2 months and you didn't get to it, but you still want to do it, there's always the freedom to write to me and let me know that, and then we'll just extend it. So, okay. Yeah, thanks for all those questions. I was going to talk on it a little bit, but I hadn't really prepared my mind for everything. So let's go to prayers. And we'll recite the dedication prayers. And again, we're reciting these for tonight, but we can think back on these 24 sessions that we've been a part of, all the study we've done outside of this, the classes, looking at the material, reading, what have you. We're dedicating all this merit for the best possible result for all beings. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish but increase more and more. And then the prayers for our long life and good health of His Holiness, that we also want to think that we're including all of our other gurus. They may have good health, long lives, and all their wishes fulfilled immediately. The wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, to the incomparably kind Tenzin Gyatso I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. And then we'll quickly recite the prayer for the swift return of our precious spiritual director, Lama Zopa Rinpoche. Peerless teacher and assembly of the children of the victorious ones, Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, victorious Losang, father and sons, along with the lineage masters, all the objects of refuge of infinite lands, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now. Holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable Venerable Guru, to you I make request. While striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and for mother living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. What a great loss! Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of the three jewels and the great waves of bodhicitta of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. And dedicate in your own heart all those beings that you are concerned about who are experiencing the varieties of suffering in this world. Send this positive energy out to them, share it with them so it becomes the cause to remove all their suffering immediately, and also to grant them all the causes and conditions that will lead to their attainment of their perfect welfare. And may these results also come to pass for all beings through what we have done here tonight and throughout this course. Okay, so we'll see again when I'm teaching for TNL again. It's just that they've got things lined up with Dr. Ross, and they aren't offering basic program more than one night a week, just with the schedule that's at TNL. But I've got a website as well, donhandrick.com, where I post things. But as I said, knowing the two of you and your interest in basic program, I'll certainly try to include you in anything that I hear about or structure. But yeah, that's the only basic program so far that I'll be doing next year that I'm aware of is with Missoula and probably the Long Rim, but we don't know for sure yet. So, all right, thank you both. I appreciate your staying power week after week, and look forward to seeing you both again sometime soon.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you very much, Don.
Thank you.